14,000 years. That number hangs in the air like a dare. 14,000 years. Older than the ziggurats, older than Ur, older than anything your history teacher ever scribbled on a whiteboard. A structure sitting beneath Philippine waters, and almost nobody talks about it. Why? Not because someone buried the truth. Not because shadowy agencies classified the files. The reason is way dumber than that, way more frustrating, way more human. Hold that thought. Let me take you to 1999. A Filipino mining engineer named Santos Iniguez kept diving around the waters near Minatogal Point off the coast of Mindanao. He wasn't looking for ancient civilizations. He was surveying rock formations, mineral deposits, normal boring geology stuff. Then he noticed something weird, rectangular stone structures sitting on the seabed, walls, terraces, shapes that coral reefs don't make. He told people about it. Nobody cared. I mean, almost nobody. A few local archaeologists took notes. Some divers went out. Photos got taken. Sketches were drawn. Then the whole thing just stalled. No funding, no university expedition, no crew with dramatic music, just silence and salt water. To be honest, here's the thing about discoveries that don't fit neat academic categories. They get orphaned. Nobody adopts them. No department chair wants to stake their reputation on a sunken ruin near Mindanao when their next grant review depends on playing it safe. So the data sat in folders. Photographs yellowed. Santos kept talking, kept pushing. The ocean kept its secrets. Fast forward. In the early 2000s, a geologist from the University of the Philippines examined some of the sonar data from that region. What showed up on those scans wasn't random debris or volcanic rubble. The formations looked deliberate, organized, structural. Pause on that word, structural. We're not talking about a couple of rocks that vaguely resemble walls if you squint hard enough. We're talking about right angles, repeated patterns, terracing that mirrors what you'd find in man-made constructions. The kind of thing that, if discovered off the coast of Greece or Egypt, would have triggered a full-blown international research initiative within months. Off the coast of the Philippines? Crickets. Now here's where the chaos kicks in. Because the story of how this discovery almost became world news involves a chain of accidents so absurd you couldn't write it as fiction. Around the same time those sonar scans were circulating in Filipino academic circles, a separate team of marine geologists from a European university stumbled onto something strange in the Cebutu Passage, south of the Sulu archipelago. They were mapping tectonic plate boundaries, not hunting ruins. Their equipment picked up anomalous formations on the ocean floor too. Rectangular, tiered, consistent. Two independent groups, two different bodies of water. Similar findings. Neither group knew about the other's work. Think about that for a second. In any Hollywood version of this story, some brilliant professor would connect the dots, call a press conference, and change history before the second act. In the actual story, the European team published their geological data in a journal focused on tectonic activity. They flagged the anomalies as unusual formations requiring further study and moved on to their next project. Their paper mentioned the structures in passing. A footnote, a literal footnote about something that might rewrite the timeline of human civilization in Southeast Asia. The Filipino team's findings? They circulated at a regional conference. A few attendees got excited. Emails were exchanged. Then a typhoon season hit. then a budget shortfall, then another typhoon season. The momentum died, not with a bang, not with a conspiracy, just with the slow grinding indifference of institutions that had other priorities. Luck almost saved the whole thing, though. Almost. A documentary filmmaker based in Manila heard about the sonar data from a cousin who worked at the university. This wasn't some big budget producer. This was a guy with a camera, a boat loan, and way too much ambition. He actually organized a dive, got footage, shot interviews with local fishermen who'd been pulling up carved stone fragments in their nets for decades. Decades. Fishermen near those waters had been finding work stone and tossing it back because they thought it was construction debris from a modern project. Nobody asked them. That documentary never aired. You know, the filmmaker ran out of money before post-production. His hard drives ended up in a storage unit. I wish I could tell you someone rescued those tapes in a dramatic 11th hour save. They didn't, at least not yet. So, where does the 14,000-year number come from? The geological dating. When researchers analyzed the depth at which these structures sit and cross-referenced it with sea level data from the last ice age, the math pointed to a period when those ocean floors were dry land. We know from extensive climate science that sea levels around the Philippine archipelago were dramatically lower during the late Pleistocene. Massive amounts of Earth's water sat locked in glaciers, precisely glaciers. Land bridges connected islands that today stand miles apart. What we now call the Sulu Sea was partially walkable terrain. Walkable. If those submerged structures are man-made, and that if still carries weight because full archaeological verification hasn't happened, then whoever built them did so when the ground was above water, which puts their construction somewhere around 12 to 14,000 years ago, before Mesopotamia's earliest known settlements, before the Indus Valley got rolling, before Egypt's story even started. Hang on. I know what you might be thinking. How can we trust sonar scans and depth calculations without proper excavation? Fair question. Great question, actually. The answer is we can't fully trust them. Not yet. That's the whole tragedy of this story. The preliminary evidence screams for investigation. Multiple independent data sources point in the same direction. Local oral traditions in Sulu and Tawi-Tawi have described stone cities beneath the waves for generations. Geological timelines align. Everything lines up. Nobody picks up the phone. Here's the second thread of chaos I promised you. While the sunken structures languished in academic limbo, something wild was happening in a completely different field: genetics. Population geneticists studying migration patterns across island Southeast Asia kept running into a puzzle. DNA samples from indigenous Filipino communities, particularly the Eta, Mamanwa, and various Lumad groups, showed genetic lineage markers far older than conventional migration models predicted. The prevailing theory said humans arrived in the Philippines via land bridges roughly 30,000 years ago. Fine. The genetic data supported that timeline. What the data also showed: evidence of sophisticated population structures, not just wandering hunter-gatherer bands, but communities with enough stability and size to leave distinct genetic signatures, the kind of population patterns you associate with settled groups, groups that stay put, groups that build. A geneticist at a conference in Singapore mentioned this finding alongside the sonar data from the Philippine seabed, just casually, over coffee. Two researchers from completely different disciplines having a random conversation at a hotel buffet. That conversation led to a co-authored paper proposal. The proposal needed institutional backing. The backing needed funding. The funding needed a government sponsor. The government sponsor needed, well, nobody could figure out which department was supposed to handle possibly the oldest underwater archaeological site in Southeast Asia. Was it the National Museum, the Department of Science and Technology, the Commission on Higher Education, bureaucracy, the Great Equalizer? Doesn't matter if you found Atlantis. If your paperwork lands on the wrong desk, you're dead in the water. Literally, in this case, one detail keeps nagging at researchers who've looked into this: the Callao Cave findings. In 2019, a team announced the discovery of Homo luzonensis, a previously unknown human species, from bones found in Callao Cave on Luzon. Those bones dated to at least 50,000 years ago. The discovery rocked the anthropological world, made headlines everywhere. 50,000 years, a unique human species. In the Philippines, that finding proved something crucial. The Philippine archipelago hosted complex, adapted human populations far earlier than mainstream narratives suggested. The islands weren't a backwater. Well, they weren't a footnote. They were a cradle. Now layer the Callao Cave discovery on top of the submerged structures, on top of the genetic data, on top of the fishermen's stone fragments, on top of the sonar anomalies from two independent teams. Each piece alone? Interesting, debatable, easy to dismiss. Together, the picture gets uncomfortable for anyone invested in the old timeline that says civilization started in the Fertile Crescent and radiated outward. Nobody sat down and planned this convergence of evidence. That's the wild part. A mining engineer went diving. A tectonic survey hit an anomaly. A filmmaker borrowed money from his cousin. A geneticist grabbed coffee at a conference. Homo luzonensis showed up in a cave on Luzon. None of these people were working on the same project. None of them coordinated. Chaos. Pure, beautiful, maddening chaos. So why doesn't your textbook mention any of this? Because textbooks don't update based on maybes. They update based on peer-reviewed, fully funded, institutionally backed archaeological excavation. The kind that costs millions. The kind that requires international cooperation, government permits, naval support for underwater work, and years of patient documentation. None of that has happened yet. Not because of a cover-up, because of bad timing, bad luck, overlapping typhoon seasons, misrouted paperwork, an underfunded filmmaker with a busted hard drive. Coffee break conversations that never turned into formal collaborations. The sheer gravitational pull of established narratives that favor Mediterranean and Middle Eastern origin stories. Not out of malice, just out of momentum. Momentum's a hell of a force. It keeps the wheel turning in one direction long after the road has curved. Filipino historians and indigenous knowledge keepers have been pointing at the water for centuries. The Samabajao, sea nomads of the Sulu archipelago, carry oral histories about drowned kingdoms. The Tausug people speak of ancestors who lived on land that the ocean swallowed. These aren't vague fairy tales. They contain specific geographic references, named locations, described structures. For a long time, mainstream archaeology treated those stories the way it treated most indigenous oral traditions. As mythology, colorful, interesting, not data. Then the sonar showed rectangles on the ocean floor. Funny how that works. An instrument confirms what grandmothers already knew, and suddenly the conversation shifts from charming folk tale to anomaly requiring further study. The grandmothers could have told you. They tried. Right now, in 2024, a small but growing community of Filipino marine archaeologists, independent divers, and university researchers are pushing hard for a formal underwater survey. The Philippine government has shown flickers of interest. International marine archaeology groups have expressed curiosity. The pieces exist. The will is building, slowly, painfully, slowly. What happens if a full expedition finally maps those seabed structures and confirms human construction? The implications don't just touch Filipino history, they detonate the standard timeline of civilization itself. They force a complete rethink of when and where humans first organized into settlement-building communities. They validate indigenous knowledge systems that Western academia spent centuries dismissing. Everything changes, or nothing does. Depends on whether the funding comes through before the next typhoon season scrambles the schedule again. Here's what sits with me. The greatest archaeological discovery of the 21st century might be sitting under warm Philippine water right now, waiting, patient. Stone doesn't care about grant cycles or bureaucratic routing. Stone just sits there. The fishermen still pull up fragments in their nets. Most of them throw the pieces back. Most of them. One fisherman, a guy from a small barangay near Bongao, kept a fragment on his shelf for years. Showed it to anyone who'd listen. Carved marks on its surface. Deliberate marks. He said his grandfather kept a similar piece, and his grandfather's grandfather before that. What happened to that fragment? Where it ended up? Who finally examined it? And what they found carved into its surface? That story deserves its own telling, because the marks on that stone connect to something no one expected. Something that reaches far beyond the Philippines. That part comes next.